and what is the plan, particularly over the festive season, because there's a lot of, it's hot, and there seems to be a whole issue about communities, and what do we do with communities that are not paying, like you said in the briefing yesterday. So just a general, what's the plan going forward?
Hi. So I'm a Metro reporter, and I've been reporting on water for quite a while. And I attended two kind of meetings with Joburg Water yesterday. And what came across there is that people had the same questions over and over again. So what I'd like to get out of this, and my task for today, is to try and communicate in a way that our readers can understand what is going on, because clearly if we're being asked the same questions for an entire year, maybe it's the way I'm communicating wrong. So that's what I'd like to get out of today. Thank you.
I'm looking forward maybe to find something that I can take back to my community in terms of the confidence of Joburg Water delivering water to the people. Thank you.
I think I've covered everyone, isn't it? Okay. And Tatis, I'm not going to ask you what your expectations are, if that's okay.
We just have one more channel.
Okay. We've already introduced ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We couldn't wait for you.
Cliff from Jacaranda FM News. My expectation from this briefing is to hear good news as we go into summer. So I'm expecting that the executive might make it easy for us to convey the message on the streets as to why we have this water throttling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think from our end, our expectations on particularly the purpose of this engagement is to try and understand how best to communicate with yourself so that you can communicate better with your readers, your viewers, etc. We're in a very technical, quite complex space. And I think some of the challenges that we've experienced over the last few months have brought us so much attention that we might think we're communicating and communicating the right messages, and we might not be getting through. So it's quite important for us to have this engagement, but to also give you direct access to all of us around the table at any given point when you do need more information. So as indicated earlier on, I do hope that we are interactive and that the presentation from the MD is going to answer some of the questions, if not all the questions that you've asked. And just perhaps one of the colleagues from Johannesburg Water, if they could speak to their expectations for this session this morning. Mzaki.
Thank you. I think I share the same view, is that after this, there's a clear understanding in terms of the issues we're dealing with, in terms of the plans, in terms of what is it that we are expecting from the organization as Johannesburg Water, but also what is it that we are expecting from the citizens, because the issue we're dealing with, it gets reported as one-sided in most cases. And I think we are in a situation where we need everyone to play a role. And my expectation is that the media would go out there and basically indicate that we all have to play a role. Whatever that we are doing as an organization, if the citizens, the consumers, are not playing their role, we would not see out of this. So for me, citizens' participation is quite important. And also, correct reporting in terms of, the issue that we deal with. So I'm hoping that the journalists understand, and if they don't, I'm pleading that they should ask, so that we can try and explain it in such a manner that when the article is written, it states the facts. Because in most cases we see it in the media explain, but when the article clear in terms of what we are discussing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Zake. I'm going to call on the Managing Director to give us an overview of Johannesburg Water for the last financial year, but also looking forward. Thank you. MD?
Yeah, you can switch off this one. So that I can. Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues, morning, members of the media. Thank you very much for this opportunity where you have set aside 2 hours really to engage with us. And I think it needs to be an interactive session, as Nondumiso said, because we need to make sure by the end of this session that you're also clear in terms of the issue that we're talking about, because that's how you can only be able to articulate it correctly. On a lighter note, yesterday, in fact, it was around about 2200. As I get home, I read an article, I won't say which media house, based on the briefing that we had yesterday. Before I went to bed, I was fighting with Nondumiso. I said, Nondumiso, but we didn't say this thing. Where is this coming from? And so on. She said to me, no, we'll take it up today when you interact with the media houses around the issue of getting the facts wrong. So I think what Mzrake is saying is very important, that in this session, please ask us so that we can be able to clarify any issue. You'll be able to see from our presentation, I don't think we've ever had a session, because usually when we have a media briefing, it's very focused to the issue that we are dealing with. I don't think we've ever had a session with the media where we are zooming into the business end to end. Because that's what I'm going to do, because in order for you to understand some of the things that we are dealing with, you need to be understanding really the business end to end. So, as I start, I'm just going to zoom into the year that we just concluded now. You may be aware that our financial year end is June. So we just finished our year, and the AG just finalized the audit, and the audit report was approved by the board about a week back or so. So we'll zoom in some of the number, because those are the number that tells us what is it that we need to do going forward. How do we address our challenges? Because indeed we have challenges that we must address them. And it also really informs us in terms of, as we go into the turnaround plan, how do we need to approach it? So just to share with you the business Johannesburg Water in numbers, because we interact a lot, but these are things that we don't say, and we just assume everybody knows. We are an organization with just over 2,800 employees. And I must indicate, and I'm saying this because I've heard one day, listening to a radio station, talking about our maintenance team, that they are contractors. The plumbers that goes up and down with the small trucks. And I'm talking about the session or convention that was happening about a month back. So 2,800, about 2,000 of them, they are in our operation division. Bulk of them is our depot staff. All the maintenance in Johannesburg Water, I must say, is done in-house in the main. Yes, there are maintenance that are done by contractors, especially in our wastewater treatment works, because there are specialized things and so on. But the normal day-to-day maintenance, when you see a plumber coming in to fix a burst pipe, plumber coming in to clear blockage, is Johannesburg Water employee. So those are the employees that we have. Of course, we operate throughout the whole city. We have our demand for water, which we really need to reduce. It's almost 1.8 billion liters a day, which really we need to reduce that. And those that were following our conversation that we were having yesterday, we need to be making sure that this month we are down to 1,600 or 1.6 billion liters. As we end the year, we need to make sure that we are at 1.5 billion liters as we end the year. And of course, getting into September, there is further reduction that we need to make. So that's the point that Mzaka already says, we need to do our part, which is around the water demand management. But it requires as well our own residents to really come on board. But these are some of your specific questions. We'll be able to address them later. So what is the extent of our infrastructure? And this is important. If we really want to understand this issue of the backlog, what do we need to do? As I always say, there is no any other way of delivering the services that we provide to the residents. It's an engineering business. It requires infrastructure and massive infrastructure. So it's very important to understand that the overall water network that we have, 12,500 kilometers. Sewer network, 11,000, almost 12,000 kilometers as well for sewer network. And if you look at our wastewater treatment works, we've got 6 of them, which are just over 1,000 megaliters, which are, of course, are across the city. Just to share with you some of the numbers, of course, this is based on audited results. As I indicated, we're going through audit, which audit was concluded end of the last month. Triple BE, of course, we are reporting 133% versus target of 125. Of course, we implement a lot of projects across the city. And as we do that, part of it, of course, to empower those local communities. We have interest of really creating jobs, even though if they may not be permanent. The important thing is that at least some of these jobs leave those community members with some form of skills. So about 1,483 job opportunities were created in the reporting period. Of course, we support SMMEs as well. 123 of them were part of the various projects. So if you look at the next block, it talks about the performance of our network, which is really the issue of how it's performing. Yes, even though we are within the target, the numbers are very high. It's something that I'll talk to later around what is it that we need to do from the infrastructure point of view. Renewal of our assets. Yes, we exceeded the target, but ideally we need to be at about 2. This is what I'll be addressing also later when we get to the point that or question that we've raised around the backlog. Water quality, we find at 99.2%, and we also do some work in informal settlements really to make sure that those that are less fortunate, that informal settlement have access to services. We were able to provide additional 927 households with access to basic water in the reporting period. Of course, wastewater treatment works, we need to do some work around the compliance, and I'll zoom into it later. This is the number that we want to go down. The issue of the water consumption per capita. It really needs to go down. So, of course, we've got a program that I'm going to zoom in, which is very important, the field service management. It's an issue that will be bringing in the current year, which really be assisting us in terms of how residents relate to us, how do we get the residents really reporting, and how do we give them feedback on an ongoing basis. Sewer blockages there, at 92, just over the target of 92%. Of course, the customer satisfaction index, we just under the target there. The other key area is the meter reading ratio, which this informs our billing, where we are reporting 85.3 6% in terms of the metering population that were billed on actual reading. We ended up with unqualified audit opinion. We were aiming for clean audit, but I'll be able to zoom in there to say, as much as we've got these challenges that we have, there are issues around really governance and so on that we need to be continuously look at. The resolution of audit findings is something that we look at very closely. And of course, for this type of business, this is a very important aspect, especially if we're talking about the issue of making sure that we have also female in our type of work that we do. This is a business that if you look maybe 20 years back, you were probably going to find very few female in the space. So we are very proud today that even if you look at our depot, if you report a query, you'll find a female plumber coming in, leading a team. So those are some of the things of transformation that we look at closely. So our financial numbers, we are, in terms of revenue, audited 17.1 billion rand. We reported a net surplus of 1.1 billion. In the year that ended, we ended the year with a positive cash of 2.8 billion. Our assets base, 22.7 billion. Of course, our capital expenditure, we spend the entire budget, which is almost 1.1 billion. But of course, here, as much as we spend 1.1 billion, looking at the extent of the infrastructure, which is something that I addressed earlier, we need to do much more than that from the number point of view. So we thought, let's share with you, how are we doing in terms of really governance and so on in the business. This is the outcome of the audit. As I indicated, our aim was to target for clean audit. Of course, we missed it. But if you can look at this, and we decided to share with you because this is something that you'll probably not be able to have access to it because you won't find it from the audit, it's from the management report. Then a more internal document or a document of the accounting officer. So you can see we've been doing a lot of work in the last 3 years to get where we are. And on all the elements except expenditure management, really all the elements are clean. There were no issues at all. The only issue that really, between us and the clean audit, is expenditure management, which is something that we'll be working on it very hard this year so that we can be able to improve. But of course, CFO can be able to share with you more insight into that later. But for now, I can indicate that expenditure management, it's issues that are mainly non-cash. You know, this is where really we could not collect revenue at the level that we needed to collect. It's an area where you find that there are issues of payment that we could not honor them timelessly. So those are the issues really that affected us there in terms of not getting the clean audit. So what are our key challenges that we need really to deal with them? So these are really the key issues that we need to deal with them in the business. Non-revenue water is at the top of the agenda at 46.2%. And our aim is that we need really to get down to 35% at least. So, but if you look at this, this is not losses. I think some of you maybe that were there started following, I explained this. This is not losses because this 46.2, it includes this element of unbilled unmetered consumption of 11.7%. And this is really a water that consumed, but we don't actually bill for it. Yes, that's not ideal. We need to be able to bill for everyone. And this was informed by the policy of the olden days. The council in the olden days resolved that certain community need to be billed on flat rate. This is the Soweto, the Orange Farm, the Alex. And of course, we are busy correcting that because the laws nowadays says every connection must be metered. And also from the business point of view, why it need to be corrected? Simply because if I'm paying for service, I'll relate to it differently. So our experience is that if we charge customer on flat rate, they end up consuming much more because there's no incentive to conserve. Because even if I conserve, I'm still going to get the same bill anyway. So those are some of the things that we are dealing with them through our water demand management to really fight that number, to say we need to get the number of the unbilled authorized consumption down. Of course, the losses are these two numbers here, which is sitting at about 34.7%, let's call it 35 to the run number. 35%, this is the actual losses. This being the fiscal loss. Fiscal loss is that volume that we lose through our infrastructure. This could be when we have burst pipe, when we have either any other infrastructure leaking. So these are what we need to deal with on our side. Similarly, this, we need to deal with it as well, because this is really what we lose through either in issues of the meters that are not necessarily giving us the necessary efficiency or accuracy that we require, issues of the illegal connection, all those really are sitting in this. So the water demand management that I'll zoom into later, it will really be assisting you to understand what are we doing. Because this, as we reduce this number of non-revenue water, will be assisting also in reducing the demand. Because our aim is more to target the losses. And of course, that usage that is not really necessary. This I've spoken to earlier, that we currently operating at 76.1% in terms of compliance at our plants, and we are really dealing with that. Collection level, as much as if you see, for instance, in the current year, the target it's about 72.3. We are aiming to say we need to be at 83%, because that's what we believe, based on our financial modeling, will put us really at a level that will be sustainable in the long term. And the turnaround plan that I'll talk to later is talking to that as well, to say we need to be able to get to that level of 83%. Vandalism and theft of JW assets and illegal connection, it's key. And including water theft. I mean, in the inner city, we've got massive problem of bad buildings, which we have started an operation in the last 2 weeks or so. Because we are losing a lot of water, we need to be able to cut all the bad buildings. And of course, because the bulk pipeline $80 houses have been built over a bulk pipeline. So these are some really issues that we need to deal with. Of course, the demand, if you look since the formation of the organization in 2000, it end up going down because we are not bringing the new reservoirs as we should. So let me zoom into the water conservation now to say all those challenges that we've indicated, how are we addressing them? So this is our water conservation, water demand management strategy. And later on, based on some of the question, because I've decided not to zoom in, issue is that towards the end of next year, we should have dealt with all those, or finalizing all those 22 reservoirs. The issue around the bulk meters, these are the zonal meter. And why do we do this? We do this so that we can be able to make sure that we are managing demand at the lowest level. Because it doesn't help saying that the non-revenue water at the corporate level or at a system level, overall system, is sitting at 46.2. So if you don't know what's informed that 46.2, you'll end up just running around. So here now, it's an issue of saying all our zonal meter, they must not just function. This 66%, we're saying we need them to be linked to telemetry so that we can monitor them remotely. And that's what we are doing. So that at any given point, we can be able to know what's happening from demand point of view at any part of the city. And we'll be concluding this issue of linking them into our telemetry by end of the financial year. Another one is active and passive leak detection. This is where really function, the more you start, then you start losing the accuracy or efficiency of that meter. We are also looking at the AMI. This is the advanced metering infrastructure, where we are looking at our a large water user. By law enforcement, this is key. And I'm sure some of you joined us in the various initiatives that we've been really trying to intensify in this year. We have actually done almost 12,000 disconnection in the current financial year. So zooming into the, probably if I go to the reservoir storage, one thing that I just want to share with you about water conservation, water demand management, it's something that we have to do it on an ongoing basis. Water demand management, water conservation, water demand management, for a water utility, it's not an event. It's something that you do forever. Because otherwise, if you don't do it, you'll end up really having challenges. So let's look at our reservoir storage capacity. Our standard, of course, at the moment, we really want to have a minimum of 24-hour storage for reservoirs and 4 hours for the tower. Towers, it's not necessary storage, you just use it to lift the water or to necessarily get the necessary head that we require to be able to supply, the area around the reservoir or that high-lying area. So that's why it's only 4 hours. But reservoir, we are aiming to be 24 hours, but of course, the more, the better. The more, the better, but for now, our standard is 24 hours to 24 hours. So as much as if you can see that there, we have 27 hours. If you look at the overall storage, all our reservoirs are almost 2,000 megaliters in terms of capacity across the city. This is the 95 reservoir and 34 towers. They give you almost 2,000 megaliters. But this number versus the demand, it gives us about 27 hours or so. But the issue is that we know there are parts of the city where we don't have that. If you look at the greater Midrand, we have challenges. We don't have 24 hours. You look at the western part of the inner city, Brixton, Westin, Coronationville, going down towards Emaratia, we don't have that 27 hours. So those are some of the areas, including Bryanston, that we need to make sure that we're improving the infrastructure so that we can be able to have the necessary capacity that we require. And why do we need to do that as well? Water is an enabler for economic development. Because if we are not ahead of the curve, we'll end up stifling development. So some of this area, we need to aggressively, as part of a plan, to make sure that we are bringing that necessary capacity so that we can open up the development that needs to happen. So what is the plan? We have 27 reservoirs that are in various stages. That those reservoirs needs to be really coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. So those reservoirs, we've got a reservoir which is in construction and 2 towers that are in construction stage, 9 that are in procurement stage, which as we get into the new financial year, those 9, they need to be in construction. And of course, we've got a number of them that are still in planning stage, but that have been planned to come through within the next 5 years. So all these reservoirs, 27 of them, they've got a total combined capacity of 514 megaliters. And these represent additional 26% in terms of capacity. And of course, it will provide the additional 7 hours above that 27 hours that I've indicated earlier. So this will help us a lot, especially if we're driving the demand down. At the same time, we're increasing the storage, because what it does, it provides us with that necessary buffer that we need to say, if whether there's maintenance going on, residents should not be able to feel anything. And for this program, for only next year, 371 million is being budgeted for to drive this particular program. So these are all the reservoirs that really have been planned to make sure that in an horizon of 5 years, they do come through. All 27 of them. You can see it's across the city, but there are a number of them here in Midrand that really supports that whole area around Midrand, because there are a lot of development that will need to come through from that. So all in all, as I said, 514 megaliters. Next year, 25-26 financial year, 371 million budgeted for this. So on the pipe replacement, you've seen earlier that we were doing only 17 kilometers. For the next 5 years, we are aiming to ramp up. And the question that you may have, how are you going to ramp up if you've only been doing 16 kilometers? I'm going to demonstrating to you later on to say, how are we going to ramp up? You'll see on average, really, we're talking about more than 100 kilometers per year that we'll be able to be doing. Within the next 5 years, we should be at above or almost 560 kilometers that will have replaced across the city. Similarly, with the sewer network, we are looking at really getting to an average of 100 kilometers in the next year from the current rate that we're replacing. And this will really assist us a lot in making sure that we improve the performance of the infrastructure. So the issue of our wastewater treatment works, that performance of 76% that we want to improve, these are all the interventions that will be coming in. with various resources allocated in various years. The first thing, of course, is to look at the issue for increasing our capacity, which we aim to be working on the projects. Some of them, of course, going to take a long time to be able to get them in, like Lanzeria, because it's a greenfield project. But in the next year or so, this 50 megalitre should be coming in, the first 50 megalitre for Northern Works. And we are also looking at a 50 megalitre which will come in towards the end of this period, the 3 years for Enadil. So these are all where we are looking at additional capacity. But the important thing is also the issues of improving the operational efficiency of all these plants. Here, that's where we look at all electromechanical equipment to make sure that we are actually making sure that all the equipment that need to be refurbished, need to be replaced, they are getting replaced. And we improve the performance of all these 6 plants that we have. So moving into the revenue enhancement, we have program that we are looking at this to say, how do we make sure that we improve our collection? One of the things that I've indicated to you to say that really between us and the clean audit is the issue of really debt impairment. So where we really we're not collecting as we should. So this is what we are looking at. We are looking at the issue of the restricting device that will help us to say when we restrict, we should use a mechanism that is difficult for customer to temper. So that we can be able to improve payment. We're looking at increasing the capacity to deal with our technical faults, which our operation division have done that through issues of bringing even contractors to assist us. We're looking at the area by area illegal connection investigations so that we can identify them and be able to remove them. Of course, including the issue of the bylaw enforcement right at the end there. So we need to do this because we need to improve our collection. And at the same time, we need to deal with the issue of illegal connection and so on. So just to share with you the system that I've spoken about for the field service management. So currently, our processes for the works management processes, they are very, manual. When I say manual, as much as we work on the system SAP and so on, we still use the paper job card, and the job card get printed and given to staff that are going to repair the best and so on. So we'll be having a system which we are aiming to be going live or launching before end of the financial year, which financial year is June, where we are digitalizing the works management process, and the system will be coming with a mobile app. And of course, the key issue is that we should be able to give feedback to a customer at each and every milestone. Because right now, if you log a call with us, you get feedback only if it's an outage or a fault that's affecting a larger community. Because what do? We'll issue a statement. We'll put it in our social media. Then you'll know that indeed we are working at our pump station in Hector Norris. We are planning to finish in the next 10 hours. But if the theater has a problem with their meter that's leaking and they log a call, there's no way that they'll get feedback from us unless if they phone, of course, and follow up to say, where are you with this particular work and so on, which is not really ideal. Because you can't have people keep on following up because you end up blocking even some of the incidents that need to be logged. So this particular system, what our aim is that each milestone will be interacting with the customer. So basically, when you log the call, and that call, back office is allocating it to a plumber number 1 or plumber A, you'll get a notification that your query has been allocated to the plumber now. When the plumber is dispatched and arrive on site to start working, of course, as the plumber opens the job card on his gadget, the message will be pushed back to you to say a plumber has arrived and plumber is doing 1, 2, 3. And of course, this will also help us a lot because sometimes we get a lot of queries whereby you'll find that a plumber is dispatched to say he must go and, an example, he must go and clear or repair a burst pipe. It's a burst pipe, And the plumber, they know in that area, they are working on it's a best pipe on the main, working on the 110 lines. They've got all the necessary material in their vehicle. When they get there, they only find that, no, it's not actually a best pipe on the main. It's leaking from the meter. And the plumber doesn't know that meter. He looks around. You are in your house. He gets back into the car. He leaves. And he didn't speak to you, the plumber. Of course, the call will come through. Customer very angry, saying that they came here, they just look around, they didn't do anything and left. But of course, it's because we didn't provide you with information to say, he has to go and a correct team comes through. So those type of things, because behind the scene, as that happen, whether it's changing from one activity to another, there is all the back office work that happen. So those things, at least our aim is that we need to make sure that we are sharing with customer, so that the customer at least knows what's happening as we are busy with this type of work. So this is just the various layers that we aim to, from the app itself to the issue of the monitoring and so on, and the actual layer in terms of the gadget that the plumbers will be using. And as I said, this is all the issues that we are aiming that by end of this financial year, which is June, which have gone live and being used by residents. And where are we now in terms of the overall implementation of the projects? We are at 75%. About 2 weeks back, we went live, on the 26th. And of course, it's still just being used internally in terms of selected staff as issue of testing, because as you know, we deal with a lot of huge data, massive cost that comes in. You can't just push this live without making sure that indeed the system, as you launch it, you're not going to have some form of crisis. So we'll be using all this period from now to May, making sure that everything is fine, at the same time training our employees as well as onboarding the ward councillors and so on. So your key question around the infrastructure backlog. We have the assets with the current replacement cost of about 125 billion. And if you look at it, the 125 billion, of course, there's bulk of the assets that are sitting there, that we're still really going to use them for a very long time. But for business of this nature and size, what worries us is here. Because, planning takes a lot of time, and some of these projects that we implement are mega projects that you don't just implement it overnight. From planning to the actual closeout of the projects, it can take you 5 years. It can take you more than that. So that's why always you need to have a very clear plan, what we'll refer to as a 10-year plan, so that you are clear to say, within a horizon of 10 years, this is what we need to do. Within a horizon of 20 years, this is what we need to do. So that you're able to make sure that you are facing in, of course, when you've got all the necessary resources. So our focus, really, there will be a lot of focus around here for us, which is the focus of saying, of course, the assets that have got a remaining full life of less than 5 years, we need to be making sure that we are addressing them. And of course, as the period progresses, even those that are in the 6 to 10 period. So why do we have that issue of the assets that are really with, having a backlog or less than the 5 years remaining useful life? It's because of this. You can see that the standard requires us to replace, our assets at a level of 2% of the overall value. But you can see that we really struggle to get to that historically. And of course, there's a year here around 2014, which we almost get there. This is the period that some of you may recall. The city at one stage had a very strong and ambitious program of 100 billion rand over 10 years. So this is when it was really starting, and we were able to really be able to invest much better on the water infrastructure. So this issue of the underinvestment, it really what drives what results into the backlog that we end up having. So I will indicate to you later on to say this backlog of 27 billion, which we know exactly where it is. This is the information that you can find even in our business plan, because it's information that also drives our planning to say, how do we need to address the challenges that we have, and so on. So we know exactly that 22 billion of it is in our water and sewer network. These are the pipes and so on. We have 5 billion in our wastewater treatment works. And of course, as we move forward in terms of the plan that we have for the turnaround, these are the things that we need to address. So what is this turnaround plan all about? I must indicate first that this turnaround plan really was approved by Council in July. It's an approved document in July, which we need to be implementing it. And will be driving all our plans in the next 5 years, that turnaround plan. And this turnaround plan really was informed by a lot of analysis and engagement that has happened at our level as an organization, shareholders level being City of Johannesburg. And of course, this plan also is part of the National Treasury Trading Services Reform, which you may have heard about it. To say, National Treasury has a program that started of the trading services reform for all the metros, all 8 of them. And the first phase focuses on water business. And what it says, that this program says that the resources for water needs to be ring-fenced. Resources for water need to be ring-fenced and invested back into water function. As you may be aware, the municipalities or council has 4 sources of income. It's electricity, water, solid waste, and general account being rates. Traditionally, of course, there's not really clear ring fencing that happen. Council has many function. Some of them, they don't generate income, but they need to be done. You see. But these reforms are clear to say the water business needs to be protected in terms of the revenue that it generates, because if we don't reinvest back, it simply means that we are not going to be able to be sustainable in the long term. So this turnaround plan, the strategy is centered around 5 strategic shifts, which I'll be able to articulate to you later on. And of course, there's consideration that the implementation need to be making sure that there's certain key decisions that to be taken between ourselves and the shareholder around certain responsibility as we were doing them in the past. And this also, it's a plan that we are implementing it within the overall turnaround plan of the city. So what are those 5 strategic shifts? The first one is to realign the customer and revenue value chain and increase cash collection. You'll recall that earlier, I've indicated that the issue of revenue collection is very key. And so this strategy is going to drive that as well. So here, what we are talking about in the revenue value chain, we need to reflect and say, from the actual device that's on the ground up to the invoicing and collection, who's supposed to do what? Is it being done where it can be done best? So those are all the things that will happen there. We need to restructure the financial relationship with the COJ for a mutual success. So this is the issue of ring fencing resources for water. Because as I've indicated, municipalities have 4, council have 4 sources of income. Of course, water assists in funding the other general responsibility of councils. So it doesn't mean that when we say ring fencing, there need to be a clear agreement. Through the shareholder compact, which will say that you need either to be paying the dividend of so much per annum. So everything else then it remains in the business and be invested in the business. So those are all the things that need to be addressed. So restore self-sufficient corporate governance to enhance operational efficiency. This is, all the issues that I'm talking about, even linked into the issue of saying the how the business should function in line with even the second bullet. We need to ramp up investment in both assets renewal and expansion, which I'll demonstrate to you. So I've started by showing you our plan for the next 5 years or so, with actual various programs that we'll be implementing. So here on this, as I go to the next slide, I'll be able to demonstrate to you what is the plan of ramping it up, this investment, and how is it going to happen. And of course, we need to make sure that we've got since this is a new strategy, of course we need to assess and say, do we have all the necessary capability to really implement this strategy effectively? Because we can't afford to fail on the implementation side. And I must indicate, there have been various milestones. And the feedback that we received end of November from National Treasury is that the latest milestone, which was the business improvement and investment plan, it was approved by National Treasury. So it means we are now going to the next stage. The next milestone is to agree on the targets, over the next 5 years, to say what is it that we must achieve each year in terms of various KPIs that each metro will be assessed on. And there is an incentive from the National Treasury for this. So the metro or the water business that implement this turnaround and implement correctly in terms of ring-fencing the water business, achieving their targets that have been set through reforms and so on, there will be annual incentive that comes in the form of allocation for capital budget to really address the issue of the infrastructure. So what are the key goals that we are looking at, in terms of our strategy that was approved by Council? Issues of accountability of revenue billing, that's key. Issues of really looking at the 30% of the customer, accounting 50% to say they need to be managed by the entity. Issues of really improving the collection completely in terms of those customers, the large water users, that will be managed by entity, but also issues of looking at collection overall improvement. I mean, right now, we're sitting at about 76%, and the aim is that we need to first get to 80%. From there, of course, improve progressively. We need to also look at the issue of the equitable share, which they say we've addressed it from the last financial year, because historically, the business was really funding the issue of the free services that we provide to informal settlement and so on. We're carrying it as Johannesburg Water. But from last financial year, the entity is receiving equitable share so that we are able to improve the service that we provide and informal settlement and so on. The multi-year financial agreement that I've spoken about earlier, increasing the investment, which is very key. And what we are looking at, as I've indicated, the budget for the entity historically has been in the range of about R1 billion. We are looking at ramping up where we can be able to get to about 3 billion rand, 3 billion rand per annum. And these are all things that we'll be able to see from the next financial year, where the aim is that we need to be at 2 billion plus in terms of the investment that we'll be doing. So we have a 10-year investment plan, which that 10-year investment plan is looking at 32.5 billion that need to be invested over a 10-year period. And of course, the finance team, they've done their modeling in terms of how we should be able to fund this. And this is part of the investment plan that was submitted and that has been approved as part of the trading reform, to say this is how we need to turn around the issue of the infrastructure. And of course, this is what's going to drive also some of the key projects that we need to be able to implementing. You'll be able to see that the first 3 years we are looking at about 6 billion of that 32 billion to come through in the first 3 years. And of course, 7 years accounting for about 27 billion in terms of what needs to go into the infrastructure. So these slides here zoom into now the category of assets. This investment over a 10-year period, what are we talking about exactly? You'll see that water demand management, of course, we are aiming that the 4 billion needs to be able to go towards water demand management. The issue of the upgrading and renewal of our water and sewer network, we need to be investing about 10.6 billion there. And of course, the issue around the new infrastructure, this is where mainly our reservoirs, where we build new reservoirs and so on, 3.2 billion, and we need to be investing at our wastewater treatment works, about 9.6 billion over the 10-year period. So this is the part of the turnaround plan, and this is the investment plan that has been put together as part of that. So as I move towards conclusion, you'll see that part of the work that we are doing currently is that as we move forward, we need to look beyond the existing funding models and how we've conducted business in the past. Because we acknowledge that especially we are infrastructure intensive business, how we invested in the past, we were not investing at the rate that we should. And hence this turnaround plan that will recognize that and say we need to approach things differently. Some of the work that we are doing, we are saying in those programs that can be able to be done, not necessarily putting our own money there, where we can use partnership with private sector, we need to pursue that. Here we are talking about even on the space like non-revenue water. To say in non-revenue water, we need to be doing performance-based contracts. Currently, regarding that, we have partnered with GTEC, which is an entity or department of a unit within National Treasury. And they are assisting us in getting the TAs or traditional advisor that can be able to assist us with really packaging those solutions for the performance-based contract. So what performance-based contract says is that you can ring fence a zone and say in this zone we have got a non-revenue water say of 40%. You agree on the baseline and so on, and you agree on the monitoring mechanism, and the private sector can come in. If there's pipes that need to be replaced, they do that. If they need to deal with the issue of bringing additional pressure management station or issues, any issue that has got to do with non-revenue water, you reduce it, say, from 40%, it goes down to 25%. Then you agree on the sharing of mechanism of the returns, where you pay them based on the return that you see or you get over a certain period. So this is a concept that we're working on, and National Treasury is assisting us on that. And those TAs or transitional advisor, they should be appointed before end of December. And in that note as well, around the work that we are doing with them to look at really off-balance sheet initiative, we are also looking at some of the mega projects like the water reclamation, where we are looking at the effluent from our wastewater treatment works, where we need really to turn into really either the potable water that can come back into the system or industrial grade water. So the work that we are doing with National Treasury also, where we are busy appointing a TA, that TA should be appointed before end of December. And regarding the water reclamation, we are looking at least 100 mega plant that needs to come in around Northern Works. Rather than putting back the entire 400 megaliters back into the resource, we need to keep either 100 megaliter that can put it back in Johannesburg. So the other issue, of course, is the key issue that I've spoken about for the trading services reform. This is what's going to help us to move into a new direction, where we'll need to be investing at the pace and scale that is required. And the aim is that, of course, over a 10-year period, we need to be able to average our annual capital investment at a level of just above 3 billion. So I'm going to end here, colleagues. And of course, if there are any questions that we haven't responded by presentation, we are going to respond to them, especially those issues around the short-term intervention for the water demand management. We can be able to take you through to say this is what we are doing and what is it that we want to see in the short term. Thank you very much, Nondumis and colleagues.
Thank you, MD. We had prior the engagement. And I know with your deadlines, breaking news, it's very difficult to contextualize, how you report. And I'm hoping this presentation will enable you to do that. And I think one of the questions that was asked, MD, was the good news. The expectations, rather, not even a question. Do we have good news? I'm not sure if, we're talking about good news for now. One of the questions that we did not speak to was the 10-year plan. We spoke to a 5-year plan through the presentation, but I think we will expand quite a bit. We did not address Coronationville specifically in this presentation, but we will be able to speak to it as well. And we had an engagement actually with the MMC, the Speaker's Office and the MD last night with the community. And there was also a question about, what are the plans for the festive season, which we did not address, but the colleagues around the table will be able to speak to that. And, you wanted the presentation to, give community confidence as well. And I'm hoping, with the context and the different areas of the business, you'd be able to, give confidence in terms of your reporting. And I think we're transparent about, even at our most vulnerable time, we have been transparent. I'm going to excuse the MD just for a short space of time during the question and answer at about 12:15, but otherwise he'll be in. If I could have the mic and we take questions, and it won't just be the MD that is responding, because we've got colleagues around the table that will be able to talk to some of your questions. Who would like to start? Isaac.
Thank you, MD, for the presentation. My question is about the water throttling, which was introduced. It's been a month now. So I want to know, what are we seeing in terms of reducing consumption? Because you've mentioned that by end of the year, we need to find ourselves, I think, on 1.5 billion. So I want to know, it's been, 4 weeks now? What are we seeing? Are we making progress? And if we are, what are the numbers saying?
Can we take the next one, Alex?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first one is an impossible question, which you will get from residents, which is about the outages and when this is all going to end. So maybe if we ask the question in a different way, if everything goes to plan, if you collect enough revenue, if all your projects are done, everything's perfect, what kind of a timeline can we say that everything's going to be fixed? Or is it ever going to be fixed? Is this just the new normal? And my second question is that, as far as I understand, billing comes from, and correct me if I'm wrong, billing comes from the city and not from Johannesburg Water. We saw the Q4 reports, which is that Joburg Water is owed a lot of money by parastatals and other big companies. But when speaking to these companies and parastatals, they seem to either one, they've stopped existing for maybe 20 years, but they still have a current account, or they're in a dispute. Is there an issue with the billing system in the city? Thank you.
Jacaranda, I didn't get your name. Cliff. Hi, Cliff. How are you? Okay. Nolas is coming with the mic. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've got a few questions. So the first one would start with the protest that we saw recently at Phumla Mqashi. Is it Orange Farm or Liasia? I don't know. And maybe just explain what is the problem there. Are they illegally connecting from people who are paying, or the area itself is not having the correct water supply system? And let's talk about the rapid development that we see around the waterfall area. Would the entity say, as the City of Johannesburg, did you plan for this kind of development? Because you will agree with me that Midrand area is constantly not having water, and it's really bad. And the third question would be, is the city owing rainwater? Because I tried to check some background on Google, but I didn't see where it says the city is owing, but they said municipalities in Gauteng. Maybe just clarity on that, if you're owing rainwater. And the fourth question would be, how much do you think, or rather was spent on water tankering system for only this financial year? And the last one would be, water throttling, when do you think it will last? Beyond summer into winter? Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand. Is it Impo? Impo at the end.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, I hear the MD talking about a lot of things that are strategic and the good things that Joburg Water is doing to endeavor to be able to provide water to everyone. My question really is about what marketing strategy or what communication is Joburg Water putting across to its customers in terms of, one, conserving water, two, paying, and three, just general communications between you and your customer. The other thing that I'd like a little bit more clarity on is our listeners on 702 for a longest time are saying they report leaks. They call the call center, report leaks, and the leaks are ongoing. And so I'd like to get an indication about what's your strategy on general leaks and how quick is the turnaround time. Just to illustrate a point, when I was still a reporter on the ground many years ago, there was an operation that was called, I think it was Operation Gcinamans, many years ago. And that operation was embedded in our minds because it was a strategy for us to save water. Do you think that, or do you not think that a similar kind of strategy will help you with getting residents to do exactly that? I'll pause for now, but I have other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think let's take responses from colleagues around the table before we go through to the next set of questions, but starting with the questions that the presentation did not answer. MD, would you perhaps like to speak to the engagement with the Coronville Coronationville community yesterday. Thank you.
Maybe, colleagues, the important thing regarding Coronationville is really to understand the system first. And when you understand the system, you'll be able to really follow in terms of the problem that I'm going to articulate. The Coronationville and surrounding area, including Auckland Park, all the way to Emaracia, Melville, and so on, they get their water from one supply line, which we call it Commando, which have got 3 reservoir complexes. It's a reservoir in Brixton, it's a reservoir in Crosby, and 2 reservoirs in Hasty Hill. So this system is linked to Ekenhof pump station. I'm sure all residents for City of Johannesburg by now they know Ekenhof, because now and then we talk about it. So Ekenhof, really, pump station of rainwater, supplies water to more than half of City of Johannesburg. So it supplies water to Liasia, the whole of Soweto, Greater Randburg, Greater Roodepoort. So the entire sort of the western part of the city is linked to that. So usually when you hear the Coronationville and so on, it's whenever there is either some form of interruption, either at Ekenhof. You'll hear that for either a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're struggling to stabilize the supply in Coronationville after that interruption. So I must indicate that that particular area, or this supply system called Commando, it's just about 5% of the overall water that comes to the supply for Ekenhof that covers that whole other area that I've spoken about. So if there's interruption, the 95% of the area will recover, just like that. A day, months, a day and a half, we have all the system back. Either it's Soweto, Greater Randburg, Greater Roodepoort, all those systems will be back. But Commando will struggle. We know will struggle for a good few weeks. The reason for that is because we have challenges with our bulk infrastructure in that area. So the bulk infrastructure operated well for many decades. But recently, when the demand is very high, that particular one is struggled to recover. And the reason being, for it, the bulk infrastructure for that area to function, it should. Currently, it requires the upstream reservoirs to be very healthy. So in other words, upstream system, or the overall system, must be at about 50% plus. Then that particular line that comes to that area will be pressurized and give us sufficient volume of about 2,500 kiloliters per hour. And currently, of course, with the current challenges that we are having, whenever there is this interruption, we struggle to get the overall system back. The overall system for Gauteng will be struggling to get back. I mean, sometimes you've heard our bulk supply saying their overall system is at 30% and so on, which means even on our side it will be low. So when the overall system is low, we don't necessarily have the necessary head that we require to pressurize the system to give us the volume that we require. Because especially what suffers is Hasty 1 and 2, because which supplies Coronationville as well as this other area, going towards Melville. The reason being, it relies on the necessary head that we'll have on the upstream reservoir. In other words, the higher the upstream reservoir, they're able to pressurize that line. But if the upstream reservoir are struggling with low level, that line won't necessarily get water the way it should. So, whereas Brixton, we're able to get water easily because we pump. As much as the reservoir are not high, we'll be able, as the volume comes through, we are pumping to Brixton, So what we are doing, we are investing about almost R1 billion. In that area, we are constructing a reservoir, Brixton Reservoir, and a tower, which is in construction. And the aim is to commission that reservoir and the tower in April next year. We are also going to be building a new pump station in that area, as well as a new bulk line from rainwater endpoint to us. And that bulk line and the pump station will assist us to now not rely on the head for the upstream reservoir to get the water to her system. So we will be pumping water. So in other words, even when the system is very low upstream, the hair still or the commando system will recover as fast as any other system once we finish those upgrades, which will bring a new configuration that will be based on pumping system rather than the gravity system. So the pump station and the reservoir, we are aiming that we should be starting with the construction beginning of next year, March or so, the construction should be starting. And it should take us about 18 months to finish the work. But as I said, the first phase of the reservoir and tower will be commissioned next year, and then there's further work that we will still be doing in there about 18 months. Thanks.
Thank you, MD. Is there a follow-up question on coronation bill? We're good. Okay, I've grouped the questions, colleagues, so it's easier to fill them through to the colleagues. I'm going to start with the CFO. Kauza, if you could perhaps speak to the billing. The question was, that is the responsibility of the city, yes, but that is there an issue as far as billing is concerned? But whilst that as well, speak to whether we do owe rainwater or not, and also the spend to date for the financial year for tankering. Thanks, CFO.
Thanks, Nandamiso, and thanks, colleagues from the media, with the questions. In terms of billing, I don't think we've got a billing crisis per se. Sometimes we read the meters from the ground, and then it gets populated into our systems, and that system is integrated with the city systems. So what the city does, we follow through quality assurance processes, and within there, they look at what has been read, and of course they even provide the pictures of the meters that they've read. However, during the analysis from the city, they look at the trends in consumptions. The meter is below the average. The city then rejects sometimes the reading, and therefore they estimate until we fix. And why they do that, it's because there might be a potential bypass of those meters, and hence it's an estimation. And therefore the customers will come and query the bill and say these are the things. Then we have a commercial laws department that goes through to investigate whether there was a bypass. In most instances, you find that there is a bypass or illegal connections. Where there is those illegal connections, we therefore penalize those customers. Do we owe rainwater? No, we don't have any outstanding amount with rainwater. We have entered into an agreement with rainwater because of the cash flow constraints. We are on a 60-40. Every month end, we pay 60% of rainwater. Within 15 days subsequent to that month, then we settle the bill. And that is our arrangement that has been made. And so far, we don't have any outstanding balance. In relation to the water tankers, I just want to inform the colleagues that the water tankers are there. It's not only there for this interruption, it's there for informal settlement, because at the informal settlement environment, they don't have a meter, they don't have a proper water flow or storages, so we provide water tankers. We have spent 165 million in previous financial year, and year to date, I think we are sitting at 54 million. Those are for informal settlement, because we've got a challenge in terms of the mushrooming of informal settlement, but we are also catering for this interruption and the maintenance that rainwater is actually undertaken. And those are the figures. I'm sure I have covered non-demiso the questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, KG. Any follow-up on those finance-related questions? We're good? I'm going to ask Victor to speak to the plans with regard. I did see him walk in a bit later. He did not have an opportunity to introduce himself. But just if you could speak to the planning around the waterfall and Greater Midrand area. Victor?
Thank you, Chair. To make the answer short.
Before you actually respond and to the colleagues what your role is.
Need to do in terms of reservoir storage, bulk pipeline extension, and that has been based on what the city has planned in terms of land uses. So when you see a development coming through, it has passed through several stages or processes of approval. And sometimes it happens that maybe the development was approved 10 years ago, but at that moment the marketing was not favoring a developer to develop. And as and when the environment or the situation changes or is favoring the development, then they come through even though it was approved 10 years ago. But to the public, it's going to see like these things are just coming up and is somebody really looking into this. But since 2015, when we noticed that in terms of bulk storage is not adequate, almost all the developments that have been coming through, they've been put on hold until we improve the storage. So what you're seeing now is what has been approved before 2015. And this is not only unique to Midrand, but citywide also. That's what we're doing. Wherever there is infrastructure constraints, we normally do not support those developments to go ahead. I think I can end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Are you covered? You're good. Any other follow-up question from the other colleagues? All right. The bulk of the other questions are for Logan. Logan, I'm going to ask you to please speak to the first two questions from Isaac around the progress to date and if we are seeing any improvements, also the outages, and also cover the throttling. Is this a lifelong? I think the throttling was asked twice, guys. If it's okay, we'll then just have just that one response. And the other questions then I'll take. Thank you. Logan?
Thank you, Nandamisa. It's Logan from Johannesburg Water. Regarding the first question, regarding throttling and water restrictions, I think just to orientate methods that we use to reorganize our system and to divert water to ensure that our reservoirs are topped up for the day to feed customers. One of them is throttling of high demand or high consumption meters, direct feeds, reservoir inlets and outlets. We do this on an ongoing basis so that we can build capacity into these reservoirs specifically to feed during the daytime. Most of these operations, some of them are permanent throttling to such an extent where we strike a balance in terms of customers having supply, but at the same time conserving water to feed other systems. Most often we also do that during the night to reduce consumption to high demand areas, prevent minimum light flows and losses so we can build capacity for the day. Coupled with that is a scheduled water restriction that we've implemented, which entails similar aspects in terms of throttling of high demand or high consumption meters and supplies. Overall, these are short-term interventions. What we're doing is not intended to be permanent solutions. Our long-term interventions or medium-term interventions is as per the MD's presentation in terms of various infrastructure upgrades projects, pressure management, leak detection, bylaw enforcement, credit control, disconnections, etc. Those are more sustainable solutions to the challenge that we currently have. Therefore, throttling is an interim solution as a stopgap measure. The impact that it certainly has impacts in a positive way on our system. When we do proceed with these throttlings or closure of certain high demand supplies at night, we do see the impact in terms of reservoirs increasing in capacity. So it does have a positive impact, but having said that, it is not a sustainable or a long-term solution to the problem. In terms of the cutoffs, I think there was a question regarding Ponglamkashi. That particular informal settlement is located in the Deep South region, the city of Liasia. And what has happened there, typically in informal settlements, we provide a level of service in terms of water tanking, or alternatively, standpipes. Standpipes are basically taps or a bank of taps that's located within a walkable radius where people can access water. In this particular instance, the residents have connected illegally into our bulk supply mains. So that means the mains that actually supply the reservoir has been compromised in that they've tapped in pipes to feed water into their own yards or their own dwellings for convenience or whatever other reasons. Now, by doing so, that has depleted the volume of water that's allowed to feed the reservoirs to keep them at capacity. So meaning that those reservoirs were unable to maintain capacity. As a result, people downstream in the system were experiencing no water conditions because the reservoirs were going critically low to empty. So in order to enforce the bylaws, we planned an operation, went out, disconnected those illegal connections, and as you might know, there were certain challenges that we faced. It is an ongoing process that we are embarking on in areas, and it's not unique to the Deep South region. These type of practices are prevalent throughout the city, but as they become brought to our knowledge, we implement our cut-off procedures accordingly.
Thank you, Mzake. But actually, just before Baby Mzake responds to the other questions, I think you loaded that question also with the issue in Protea. I'd like the COO, to speak to some of the challenges that we experienced over the weekend while we start trying to resolve the issue in Protea Glen, specifically around encroachment on our servitude. Gugu?
Thanks, Chair, and good morning once again, colleagues. In relation to the issue of Protea Glen, I think the understanding was that the team did an investigation just to check what was the issues that caused the supply in the various extensions in Protea Glen. And what was discovered over and above the valves that failed, it was the issue of encroachment, and I think MD touched on that issue in relation to the presentation. There are a number of houses that have built on our servitude, which then caused the team to struggle to find the problem to two of our pipelines where the residents had built on top of our servitude. So what the team had to do is to walk the line across all the houses on top of that pipeline until they could find a space where they then were able, and it was in someone's yard. So luckily inside someone's yard we were able to then find a space where we were able to dig and further investigate on our pipes. So those are some of the challenges that the team faces when they try to resolve the issues of water supply. But I think in addition to the issues of Pumla Mkashi, I just thought that we should just indicate that we have 2 reservoirs in the Liasia area, and I think Logan has spoken to that, which is Liasia Hospital Hill, as well as Liasia High Level Reservoir. And those informal settlements that have illegally connected there, they create an increase in demand, and also which results in the very low levels for our reservoirs. And I think, Chair, one of the questions that was raised by the colleague here is, we are planning to have a reduction in our water demand, and where are we currently sitting with our numbers? So just to give an indication, since the beginning of November, which is the 4th of November, we have been on a downward trajectory in terms of our water demand management. And currently, as we speak today, which is the 10th, we are sitting at 1,560 megaliters per day. And that is contributed, and I think, Chair, there was a question of the aggressive water demand management interventions that we are currently embarking on. So over and above the water demand management interventions that the MD spoke to, we have other aggressive water demand management reductions interventions, which have then contributed to that flow going down. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Gugu Mzake, if you could speak to the turnaround with respect to leaks being reported. I think Umpo, spoke to, repeated leaks across the city, and what are our plans?
Thank you for that question. I think it's partly covered by the presentation from the MD. The system of FSM is most definitely going to deal with that issue, because it's instant, it's live, it's electronic, so there is no loss of any information once that comes on board. But as part of our aggressive interventions, as the coup indicated, we need to reduce our turnaround time or response time. Currently, our response time talks to 48 hours in terms of any burst or leak that is reported. As an organization, we've taken a decision to reduce that to 24 hours. And obviously, for us to do that, there's certain interventions that needs to be implemented to basically support that response. And I can mention a few of those that we've implemented, and already we can see there are some improvements. For example, we had to look at all the critical material that we need for the teams to be able to respond much quicker. We are in the process of procuring that material. It has been advertised. We're actually issuing purchase orders for the delivery of some of that material. Now, what that means is that if there is a service failure, meaning a burst, then teams have that material readily available. We've procured additional TLBs so that there's enough TLBs for the teams to be able to excavate, expose the burst, and actually attend to it quicker. We're putting together framework contracts in terms of emergency so that they can come on board and assist our internal teams as well. We've extended our operational times in terms of teams. They're working longer during the week. We've brought in additional teams during the weekend so that we can work on the backlog. So those are some of the few interventions that we've implemented to basically reduce our 48-hour turnaround time to 24 hours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see the CFO has his hand up.
There was one question that I've not responded to. It was in relation to the accounts from public entities, that there is queries. I just want to highlight that we are not aware of any entity that has got those type of challenges, but we request that if they can contact us, we can be able to resolve. But you might find that the issue is an ownership issue, that they have abandoned their buildings, but the ownership has not yet changed at the city, and hence the account is still active. And you might find that that building is hijacked and there is consumptions that is being taken place, and we are currently experiencing those type of incidences at this moment. But they can contact us at Joburg Water. We'll be able to resolve those issues. Thank you.
Just to expand on that, CFO, is that our disconnection program also covers those bad buildings in terms of disconnecting at level 3. So we are dealing with those disconnections. In respect of our marketing and communication strategy, and also linking it up perhaps to your experience with Namanzi a while ago. Yes, the water demand management strategy and water conservation strategy is supported by marketing and communication, but also stakeholder engagement strategy. We launched the Vigela Manzi Protect Our Future about 4 weeks ago, which we'll be building on during the festive season. I think it also covers the question earlier prior to the presentation, whether there is some communication planned around the festive season. We had, as of last week, started an education campaign on community radio stations. We are kicking another campaign from next week onwards that focuses on water conservation specifically. And I think when the MD started with his presentation, is that one of our expectations is that as a collective, we actually take responsibility and share the same message, because not just the city but the entire province is struggling with this resource. We've also engaged a number of stakeholders. We started with councillors. We've done a few. We'll be continuing with those in the new year, just to actually ensure that they take the same message to their constituencies, and obviously residents, customers, consumers within their specific wards. Yesterday we had an engagement also with the business sector, also on water management, water demand, and water conservation. We are also on track with civil society, religious and traditional groups, NGOs, as well as communities through some mediums, amongst them, community hall engagements around the role of Johannesburg Water, why it's important to pay for services, for instance, over and above consuming water, why it's critical not to abuse or use the sanitation infrastructure in a wrong way. So yes, there are plans in place, and I'm sure you've interacted with some of the messaging on our social media platforms that will then still be continued, not just for the festive season, colleagues. We're looking at a 3-year program. I think you'd know, for instance, that Cape Town took quite a long time to get the message across, I think plus minus 36 months as well, to reduce their consumption. And I'm sure a lot of you now, taking your showers is a bit of a struggle, because you run after the drips that you're getting because of that throttling. And for you to understand why we're doing that is quite important for the bigger picture, and particularly long term, because the challenge, whether we fix Lesotho in the next 36 months or so, is still going to be there. So it's important, how we relate to water and how we consume this resource. I think we would have covered the bulk of the questions. It is 12:04. I know we started a bit late. Would you like to perhaps have another round of questions? I see Alexa Simpo, and I see Cliff, and Mzaki wants to add something. Let me start with Mzaki before I go to the media.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I should take this opportunity, the issue of illegal connection. And I think this is where we requesting the media to assist us. illegal connections are one of the issues that are actually draining our system. As the MD indicated, if you are not paying for a service, you exploit it. Now, the city has an indigent policy which says if you cannot afford services, come and register, and the city will provide you with those services. Any person other than a person that is registered to the indigent person register has to pay for the services. And I think this message, as the media, we need to take it out there. We expecting anyone who has a tap, who uses water, to pay for it, or they should be on the indigent. I'll make a simple example. The operation we did at Pumlamkashi, immediately we could see improvement in the capacity of the reservoir that supplies that system. So that tells you the impact that these illegal connections are having. So as you know, we are approaching infrastructure issues. We also need to approach what the citizens are doing or adding in terms of illegal connections within the system. And when we go out there and do this disconnection, we get quite a big push from the same residents. It cannot be, colleagues. It needs to be clear. It cannot be. The law says you have to pay for what you use. If you can't afford, there are systems that will support you. And pleading again, we need the media to convey that message. We need to pay for our services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mzaka. I'm going to take Cliff, Alex, and Mpo in that order. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ndumiso. I'm just looking for a soundbite here. When I arrived, my expectation was that the city will tell us the summer outlook. So if during the process it was answered, kindly just repeat what is the summer outlook in terms of Joburg water? What can residents expect? Yeah, thank you.
Alex?
Thank you. I just wanted to know if there was a possible answer to my first question, which was, if everything goes perfectly to plan, when can we expect our problems to be sorted out? Thank you.
Mpo?
If you look at the issue of, or maybe let me ask it in this way, where the city has found, let's take Protea Glen, for example, where you found that houses were built on top of your infrastructure. What's the plan with those type of areas where you find that, I don't know if the city of Joburg itself didn't do its due diligence in making sure that property is built where it should be built, but my question is, what's the plan with situations like that? Should you experience issues again in those areas, how are you going to deal with that? Because from the sound of it, it's about, you said, over 200 households, I think, that are built on top of your infrastructure. The second question is the issue of informal settlements. So we can't run away from the informal settlements that are in our city. And we also can't run away from the fact that many of them, and I'm not excluding people who are not living in informal settlements, don't pay and therefore connect illegally. Is there a particular strategy that Joburg Water has in tandem with the city to deal with the connection at that level, at informal settlement level, so that you don't experience what you did in Liasia, such that your infrastructure is compromised in that way? My last question also is about, there are areas in Soweto, for example, that I've just spoken to people this morning. Protea South, for example, they haven't had a consistent water supply for a week. There's no communication in terms of why and what the plan is. Sinawani, parts of Sinawani in Soweto, same story. So Pimville, a similar type of story. So my question is, how many areas, let's say in Soweto, are experiencing water issues that you're aware of? What type of issues are they? And again, what's the plan in terms of resolving those issues? Thank you.
Can we finish with your sound bite, Cliff?
Thanks, Londimis. I think I'll just speak to the issue of our plans in relation to encroachment. And I think this area is about bylaw enforcement. We have a number of bylaws that the city needs to implement. So we need the assistance of COJ to assist us with bylaw enforcement. And in relation to the illegal connections, we are working with JMPD to assist us with those disconnections of illegal connections. But there are various challenges that we do then face in terms of the availability of JMPD, where then we have to postpone those disconnections. But I think I'll ask GM to just then speak to the areas in Soweto where they experience water cuts. But I think the media needs to understand that currently we are implementing level 1 restrictions, as per the Premier had indicated in his address. So that level 1, then we disconnect between 9 to 4 o'clock, we started the implementation on the 11th of November. A schedule was issued as well in terms of the areas affected, but we issue also on our daily communications the areas that will be impacted by the level 1 restrictions. Thank you very much.
Thanks. If you look at the issues regarding supply, as we've indicated, there's 2 types of restrictions. One is high consumption area where we do permanent restriction, right? Where we are reducing the supply into the areas. And I think, colleagues, let's be honest. How many of us have seen some of our relatives, our neighbors, cleaning their driveway with clean potable water? Let's be honest. Many of us, right? Now, that's why earlier I said, Chair, we need balanced reporting. There are issues because we are not saying things honestly. The areas that are currently, some of them, not getting water is because they are wasting water. Soweto is my second home. I'm from Pretoria, but Soweto is my second home because the first 15 years of my career was in Soweto. And in Soweto, there's what they call Soweto washing. Anyone who stayed in Soweto, they know that. They take their clothes, they put it in a tray or basket, and they open the tap and they leave it. And it runs. We need to address those issues. It should not be looked at one-sided, the supply side. That's why we're talking about water demand management. It should also be indicated on the usage side. Right? I'm actually challenging media to look at how many car washes are out.
etc. What would be the time?
As I'm saying, let's, as right, as from load shedding, what we then did, we started looking at how we use our electricity. As much as they were looking at their infrastructure, some of us started looking how we use our electricity. Some of us started installing solar panels, right? Some of us started removing that cell phone charger that you leave and running. Now, it requires interventions from us as the city, but from the change in demand by the communities for us to bring the system to stable. So, Chair, I would be lying to say how long.
Okay.
The system has to be stable.
Alex, I'll take you. Can I just give Mr. Chitsa an opportunity? No, on a daily basis, I think we communicate with yourselves twice. I think the first communication comes just before 9 o'clock. That speaks to planned as well as unplanned disruptions for the city. And quite a few of you actually report on that. And Umpo is actually saying, there's very little communication. And I said when we started, we need to improve. We also need your input. But we also, as Mzaki has been saying, need for you to also assist us. There's information that seems to, be put at the back of the diary. But those speak to the unplanned ones. We tell you as and when they happen. The planned ones, we tell you 7 days in advance. And on a daily basis, we then remind you. In some instances, we actually tell you 14 days in advance. We also have an SMS platform where we segment communication. So if you live in Protea Clan and you've registered, you would know as and when things are happening. We've got this challenge, this is how long it's going to take us to resolve it. Please be patient with us. So we've got that platform. We also have a WhatsApp platform separate to the media one. We also have 2 WhatsApp platforms for councillors. First, the 7 WhatsApp groups across the city that is for councillors to share those messages with their constituencies, which would be the residents in their respective areas. The same communication that you receive, they also receive. So if there is any development, whether it's the throttling that we're doing, it just might be an overload for now. But then we also have another councillor group, your PR councillor group, that also receive these messages. So there's various platforms that we try to use to get those messages across. I think our social media is so loaded with most of these challenges, as and when we get a report, for instance, from residents. It's routed from the call center, from social media to the call center, to to the depots, etc. I think that value chain the MD explained earlier on. If you're on our Facebook page, the same happens. Some interact with us through the City of Joburg's call center. We have our own mini call center in the entity, and I think the MD did speak to the FSM functionality that we currently implementing. So over and above all the press notices that we issue, there's those set communication platforms. In actual fact, we get audited on those numbers, whether we have gotten to you within these time frames, as per the SLA, with the shareholder being the City of Johannesburg. But we're keen also, colleagues, to get your input. How do we communicate better? How do we simplify these messages? We think the Joburg residents are the most educated around even the terminology in the water space. The questions we get is, am I being throttled today? Though there is a correspondence around that. I don't know whether we get lazy to go to these platforms to actually see that within my area, I'm going to be shut down from 4 to 8. People in England don't know anything about throttling. I'm not being funny, or even in Swani. So some of these terminologies are actually thrown at us, even in some of these settings, to say, but when is this happening? The upstream, the flow, the valve, the PRVs. Even my 77-year-old mother knows about the valve. That's what she calls the valves. It's purely because of some of the communication that we issue. I'm going to take Mr. Chitsa.
Sorry. Is it on? Oh, thank you. Yeah. The commando system phase 2 project, for instance, the MD spoke about 18 months. But what can happen there is that we've got mafias, construction mafias, we've got so many challenges in that space. We've got Wula from DW.
Also, where we find those challenges as and also the issue around, I think we did cover the informal settlements in terms of payment. And are you happy with that? I hope. Okay, you'll offline it. Yeah, cool.
We did speak to it, Chair. I think it was the implementation of it's the bylaw enforcement.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The one that we haven't spoken to is the summer outlook.
The soundbite.
The soundbite at December.
I'm not trying to avoid it. Cliff, what exactly would you like to hear?
During the summer period, you know that thing when you are listening in your car to say, Joburg Water says, don't worry this summer, there will be enough water. Thank you.
Ntatis, is that your hand? Oh, you were just I thought you wanted to speak to that. Cliff, we are not breaking the cycle. As the coup has indicated, the program, if we do achieve the set goals, would conclude in September 2025. Yes, we know there's the heat wave, there's challenges with throttling and us recovering our system sometimes, but no, we're not stopping with that program. And I'm hoping that is good news in the sense that residents will play along and assist us in our efforts to conserve water. And those that are also sitting in low-lying areas do not, deny those that are in high-lying areas by hoarding water as soon as their taps have water. So if that is a summary, it is us pleading with consumers to please consume this resource responsibly, which I think is going to be reinforced by the Vikela Manzi Protect Our Tomorrow campaign. Are you happy, Ku?
Yes, but I think in terms of December, as previous years, we do experience a low demand in December, Chair, because the likes of all the institutions are closed, VETS, UJ are closed, people visit Durban, our people that came here to work, travel back to Limpopo, they travel back to various areas. So generally in December, we experience low demand. With that said, I mean, the summer outlook for us is looking good.
Thank you. I welcome Akoduga amongst us, I hope, ne? And we will consume responsibly. May I please ask the MD just to wrap up for us? We've got a little bit of eats outside, and we hope to mingle and have those offline conversations before you leave. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, colleagues and members of the media. And I'm sure this is not the first and the last session that we're having of this kind, because as we are starting or embarking on a new journey of really implementing our turnaround plan, we will be inviting at certain interval like this, where we can sit and reflect and be able to show you the progress around our implementation. And of course, if there are any challenges, we'll be able to reflect them and also at the same time indicate to you as to how we are going to be dealing with those challenges. We will also, of course, as we move forward, engage on regular basis as we do around really giving feedback around our short-term measure. As you have heard earlier from our colleagues in operation, that we are seeing progress with what we are doing. You know, in the last 4 weeks or so, we've seen demand going down. In fact, demand is at an average of about towards 1,600, which is quite good. And this is what we want to see. And we appeal to you to say, please help us to spread these messages to the rest and to say, let's not lose focus. We can be able to do this if we all work together. And on our side, we're going to be carrying on with our water demand management intervention so that towards the end of this financial year, we're able to have a much better system that doesn't rely mainly on throttling and so on. It relies on all these other measures that we're implementing. The issue of pressure management, the issue of other technical intervention that we are doing behind the scene. So thank you very much for attending this session.